Episode 3, Two Dicks, One City. The crux of the last episode, and truthfully the crux of this entire case, is the question: is Blaise's attack Duran Bailey's murder? Are they the same event? Was it Duran Bailey that attacked Blaise and then she murdered him? Let's walk through what we know and the evidence we have. Let's start with the timeline. Blaise began telling people about her attack in May, June, and July, before Duran Bailey was found murdered on July 8th. How do we know when Blaise's attack happened? Blaise herself isn't sure because she was in the throes of her addiction at the time and high on meth. The night she was attacked, she drove to an ex-boyfriend's home who wasn't there, and she left a note and her car. We know it was Memorial Day weekend because he was out of town for the holiday. She also began telling other people about her attack as well. Blaise described her attacker as huge, more than 200 pounds, and bigger than 6 feet tall. Duran Bailey is 5'10", 137 pounds. Duran Bailey would have barely been taller than Blaise, who's 5'6". Blaise, at the time of her attack, was living with friends at a weekly apartment rental, the Budget Suites. This is where she says her attack happened. The location of Duran Bailey's murder was more than 8 miles away at Nevada State Bank. Here is Blaise's first attorney, Phil Cohn, talking about discussions he had with one of the detectives on the case, Detective Thousand.
Thousand, I did talk about this either in discussions or on the record. I don't remember anymore, but it's like, we know that people stay in their neighborhood. It's just what people do. They just hang out in a certain neighborhood. And it's 8 miles between those 2 points on Flamingo. And that's just, she never went there.
July 2nd, 6 days before Duran Bailey's murder, Blaise leaves Las Vegas to go back to Panaca, Nevada, a more than 2.5-hour drive from Las Vegas, and she moves back in with her stepmom and dad, Becky and Lorenzo. Here again is Phil Cohn.
The reason why she went back to Panaca in that first week in July was she thought that some guy had tried to poison her. And no, she poisoned herself. And the doctor said this, and that she's suffering under meth poisoning.
And there are medical records proving that Blaise did go to the hospital. 6 days after that, on July 8th, Duran Bailey is found murdered. July 8th, more than a dozen people placed Blaise at her parents' home in Panaca the entire day. The only time Blaise is not accounted for is when her parents say she was asleep. Attorney Phil Cohn says Detective Thousand and Detective La Rochelle didn't know Blaise was in Panaca, and Phil says they believed she was living in Las Vegas at the time Duran Bailey was murdered and went to Panaca to hide after the murder.
They always believed that she was down here all the time. But when I proved to them, no, she was in Panaca. She saw the doctor on Friday, 2 days before the killing. No, there's no way she was there. She was in Panaca, and we could account for her. The only time we could not account for her, and that's when they changed their theory, was we could not account for her from the time her parents went to bed at 11 o'clock on Saturday night until they woke up Sunday morning.
Now, let's circle back to Diane Parker, the woman who says Duran Bailey raped her less than a week before he was found murdered. Diane Parker told police on July 1st Duran Bailey broke into her apartment while she was with friends who also lived in the same apartment complex. Diane's boyfriend, Stephen King, was not home at the time of this break-in. But Diane told police Duran Bailey slapped her in the face, which is when her friends intervened and threatened Duran Bailey and told him to leave Diane alone. Diane says later that same day, Duran Bailey came back to her apartment and anally raped her. Police go and speak with Diane and take her to look for Duran Bailey, who was homeless. Diane and police looked in a few spots, and when they couldn't find him, that was pretty much the extent of their investigation into her rape. Diane Parker tells an officer in reference to Duran Bailey, quote, "He's gonna kill me." Police ended their investigation into her rape and typed up a 10-sentence report. That was it. 3 days after Diane Parker reports her rape to police and it's clear nothing's gonna be done, Duran Bailey is found murdered.
The close proximity of Diane Parker and her boyfriend to the actual crime scene is remarkable. You know, they live essentially 1,000 yards from where the body was found, from where Duran Bailey's body was found.
We've touched on timeline, location, Blaise's attack, and I know this might seem like a small differentiation, but Blaise was addicted to meth. Duran Bailey used crack cocaine. They're not the same thing. I also want to go back to what Blaise told police about her attack. She stabbed her attacker once in the groin, maybe penis area, and as Blaise got away, she says her attacker was crying. Duran Bailey's penis was removed after he was already dead. Because this injury and the rectum injury was post-mortem, Blaise was charged not only with the murder, but with sexual penetration of a dead body, a charge which required her to register as a sex offender. Now for the crime scene. It was horrific. There was blood absolutely everywhere. There was some chewed gum, pubic hair combed from Duran Bailey's pubic hair, male footprints in blood, semen. Duran Bailey's body was wrapped in plastic and paper towels had been stuffed where his penis was. The state's theory about this case is that Duran Bailey's murder is the same attack that Blaise began describing in May.
I think sometimes people think that she went back to seek revenge on the person that attacked her.
It is admittedly a strange story. The problem with the idea that she's actually the killer is significant in that her timeline for committing the crime is extremely narrow. Her connection to Duran Bailey is non-existent. The state's case, for example, is she went to Duran Bailey and in order to purchase drugs from him, and that deal went south and she killed him, which happens. The problem with that is there's no evidence that Duran Bailey was a drug dealer. Duran Bailey is homeless. I don't know many homeless drug dealers. Duran Bailey used crack cocaine. Kirsten used methamphetamine. They aren't the same. Duran Bailey and Kirsten killed him. If this is the story, Kirsten killed him and left no evidence of herself at the crime scene and no evidence of Duran Bailey in her car. So I don't know I don't see how that's remotely in the realm of possibility.
DNA collected from the crime scene came back to an unidentified male. The shoe prints found in blood were a male shoe, and Blaise's car had no blood or evidence. Her tire tracks also did not match tire tracks found at the scene. When Blaise was arrested, she told me she initially believed that she had murdered that man who attacked her. That was until she saw a photo of Duran Bailey, the man who died. Blaise sat in the Clark County Detention Center waiting for her trial to begin and maintaining that Duran Bailey was not the man who attacked her.
If Kirsten didn't do it, then the natural question would be, then who did?
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely a valid question. Who did it? And that's not Kirsten's concern.
To believe Blaise, you have to believe police arrested the wrong person and that Blaise is innocent. You must believe she really was attacked in May, and it was a separate incident than the murder of Duran Bailey. That she was in Panaca on July 8th during the time of the murder. And you have to believe that two men, within a few weeks of each other, both had their penises cut in the city of Las Vegas. Is that something a jury would believe? That's next time on Presumption of Guilt.